Okay, so for our first step, or part one of our project, we're going to do kind of what we did in week 3, but really just focus on the content, the pages, and the images. So first, the folder setup, and I've placed it here, but I'm actually going to show it to you because I think it would be helpful. So in this case, I have only my private repo open. So this is an important step to remember. The work you're about to do is only going to be shared with me, so it needs to go in your private. Now we're going to do part 1, part 2, part 3, and then the final part will end up moving it over to the public so you can share it with everybody. But for this first step, it will be in your private. And for me, I have only that private folder open, not my public, just to keep things simple, because as you see, I already have several folders in here. So to create this base folder for our projects, I click outside of here. I click here for folder, and I can see that it's going to be at the same level, which is what I want. So I want project. And then inside a project, I'm going to click in there. I'm going to create 2 more folders. One's what I call images, IMJ. I click back here. I'm going to do another one called P1. Okay, so in this case, we'll end up adding a P2 and a P3, but we'll use, as we've done in the prior work, that same images folder. And I do this so that as you move through the steps of the project, you don't duplicate all these images that you're creating. Okay? Just FYI. So that's the structure that you want to have. And then let's move into the content itself. Okay, so now you're going to also create in your P1 folder a readme.md file. And we've created css.mds. So for the markdown, if you're not familiar, if you're at this point still kind of mysterious about markdown, right, go markdown cheat sheet. And go look at it, because you definitely are going to need to use some, because here's what's going to need to go in that README file. So first, I want you to describe the topic that you've selected for the site, and then use a heading for this, right? So here's an H1 that would probably make sense for this. So create that file and put in there. Sorry, I'm back up here, and then write a paragraph, right? Tell us your topic, that'd be your H1, and then write a paragraph and tell us why you selected this topic, right? So a little bit of writing here. Now, because we've already had an experience using ChatGPT, I'm not going to go back over that, but if you want to go back and look at some of the content we covered, or just find some new content about how to prompt, or if you feel comfortable prompting, then go start writing your, researching your topic using maybe something besides chat. There's other tools out there for sure. Okay, but so what you're going to do is, once you determine your topic, and I definitely recommend spending some time here, because what you're going to end up doing is organizing your site content. Like if I was to look here for mine, right, here's, and as I talk through the project, we'll talk about different parts of this. Right, but what I ended up doing was how to write, empowering every student with AI conversations. But really, this is about prompting, right? And so I thought this would be a good topic for me to choose, because I want to learn more about it as well. Okay, so in this case, definitely spend some time thinking about what you're going to do, and then write a paragraph telling us about that, and include some of the prompts you use, right? And some of the content, not much, right? But you can use headings for this as well. This is really basically your organizing document. It kind of helps you just think through, do enough prompting to say, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And you're going to stay with this for all steps. So just make sure this is something you want to use. Right, included. So now come up with text that you will use for your menu, right? And use heading and bullets for this. Now this is all in the README file. So I want you to have not only thought through the content, but also using bullet points, again here in the README file, right? You could use ordered, unordered list, but what you're basically going to do is come up with what this is going to be. Like for me, I have, of course, home, and this is one thing that's a little different from what we've seen in some of the content, because in this case you can have a sub navigation that would navigate within the page, but this menu is consistent throughout your site. So we're actually thinking about organizing a bit larger site than we've seen in the content, but we have seen how to style navigation, so it's not as if we haven't. So but if you click through mine, you can see that that menu stays consistent. And that's really, in this step, what I want you to do is to actually come up with the text of your menu. Now, can this change over time? Absolutely, right? But do this documentation step and then commit with README complete. Okay, so now start by creating your index file. Now, this should not be a real big surprise, but these are required. Now, you have to use the structure of semantic, or using headings, using main, and navigation. Right? All these are required. So the way you implement these is really kind of up to you, and especially when we get to table and ordered and unordered list. But what you're going to do here is on your index file. And generally your index file has your most content. And what do I mean by that? Well, remember when I showed you the outliner, right? So for me, when I look at my index page, and that's what I'm on here, is like it's got, of course, my H1 and then, my 6 subtopics, and then on my welcome and my AI news, I have even subtopics inside of there. So you'll see me say, like I kind of did in week 3, is right. I said at least 5, and then a couple of these that have sub. But if I go to Y, that won't have as much content in it. Okay, I definitely want to have H1 and a couple of layers here, but it doesn't have to have all the content that your index file does. Okay, and don't use divs here. Because divs are really something we're trying to, as a discipline, as a industry, get away from, because there's just other ways to organize our content. Now, based on your content, have at least 3 of the following: the detail, the mark, the time, the site, and the address. So use at least 3 of these on your content for your index page. Okay. And then the footer, link to the AI tool you're using. I'll show you mine in a minute. And then create anchor links on the page. Something like begin, go to top. But like I said, if you wanted to, and I'll go back to home here, some of you, and I noticed many of you, actually in this menu created links to your content, especially on that index page. And if you're going to do that, just do it somewhere outside of a standard menu. Okay, now we're going to learn how to remove this menu as far as the content later, because we won't need it because it'll become a regular menu. But for our navigation, we definitely want to have that there. Okay. Okay, so create anchor links, and again, you can create anchor links, anchor meaning on the same page, and then link to internet resources related to your content, and make sure they open in a new tab. So as an example on mine, I did an AI podcast. Now notice what that does is it opens in a new page, right? Or sorry, a new tab. And then I also linked to other videos. There we go. Okay. So, and then make sure you have headings, right? And this is what I was talking about before. Make sure you have headings and that your HTML outliner has no untitled, right? You don't want any of the untitled. And on this index page, this is a repeat of what I said, right? You want to make sure you have, right? And I have 6, but a minimum of 5, and then some subtopics, okay? Right. And then sublevels, right? Make sure no untitled. Now update your metadata and your title, right? So if you don't remember, this is your title. So what you can see is as you move through my pages, each one has a unique title. And then if you go and look at the head, you can see you should have some unique content. The author wouldn't change, but the description for each page would, you would want to change that. Okay, because those are unique and you want to have them. And again, validate your code, make sure it validates, and then commit with index created. So now you're going to create these 3 pages for your menu, right? So now if I come back here, now I'm going to create the pages that will be linked in here. All right, so where am I at here? Okay, right here. Use lowercase, no spaces for the file name. Really important, okay? And then here, make sure you're using a similar outline as far as header, main, and nav. And then, of course, what comes after that will be a bit more flexible, but you want to have some content for them. And in this case, right, under your H1, have at least one sublevel. So, you know, add content as you want to organize it here. And then metadata can be that, right, but it has to have a unique title. Right? Actually, this is kind of counter to what I just said. You want a unique description. I'll add that as well, right? And include a link back to the index page. Remember when Dave showed us and Dave was doing the /? Don't do that. Because in this case, because we're doing them in folders, when you want to link back to the home, you can just hit the index. You can have a link for the index itself. Not to the / because of our folder structure, that wouldn't work. Okay, generally called home, but you can call it something else. Okay, so validate your code and commit with menu pages working. Now in this case, you do want to make sure all your links work, right? Now you're going to have sub content on each one of these, right? That is unique, and you want to have then some content that, you know, is formatted differently. You notice how on my start, right, I ended up using that mark. Here's a separate link, right? And then I used a couple other things here, right? And then on my Y, you can see I used that detail. So yes, include those things that we talked about for the content on the index, but also include them on the subpages as well, okay? All right, unique title. I'll update that. All right, so now menu created. So make sure they all work. And by the way, also make sure you have a footer. Now I'll talk about the footer in a minute, right? Here's my footer. Make sure you have that consistently as well. I'll talk about that in a minute. So now do images, right? So now what you're going to do, oh sorry, this is images. So using the AI tool. Now I showed you how to do this if you want to go back and review that. But here's the thing, right? Each page needs at least one image, right? To all the pages. So at least one. And can you have more than one? Sure. But don't overdo images. And make sure they do fit in your page. Like when you get them off these sites, they're going to be really large. So make sure you've resized them down. I think I ended up resizing mine down to about 300. Now, by the way, I do need to put width and height. That's something that we're going to learn as we get a little further into images. So, but you do want to use that idea of if you can use lazy loading and the other attributes that we saw there. And then make sure you use a fig caption, right? And then the image is in there and an alt and a title. Oh, I did have it on here. Weight and height was on there. So I guess we had covered that by now. Maybe that was in this week's. And then use fig caption. So you'll always want to nest those. So figure, right? And then is the outside and then nested in there is your IMJ, and then make sure you have a fig caption. So make sure all images have figure and fig caption. So when you're looking at them, right? So this one, right? So I have figure, image, right? Fig caption. Right, so you want to make sure you have all of those. And on that one particular one, I actually need to include height and weight. And then I did need to include the attribute as well. So that's good. I need to go do that. So now do images, right? So each page, so if I was to go look at Y, there's my Y. If I go look at start, there's my images for start, and so on. So make sure every page has one, and then commit with images and make sure they have a fig caption. So now create another page. So now we're up to, we have one index page, 3 pages here. So now we have 4 actual HTML files. So we're adding one more, and this one will be called site.html. And in there, you'll create 2 sections. Now, we're going to populate these as we move through. You're not going to do a color palette. You will do that next time in step 2. But for now, and I just have mine in the footer, it's called sitemap, but the link is site.html, which, by the way, remember, all your file names should be, and I said this earlier, lowercase, no spaces. And I did include the menu because the menu should be on every page, and I have a section now for these 2 as well. Okay, So, color palette, right, for now. Yeah, and then link this page to the footer. Now, that's what I was saying before. So every page, I'll go back to home to show you, in your footer should have a link to your sitemap. Okay. I did on the index page because it was so large, put a return to top, but I didn't put it on all the pages because I didn't feel they needed it, but you can if you want. Okay. Now, once you get this done, and by the way, again, because what you'll need to do is once you've created this site.html, you can do this. By the way, now that you know, hopefully you've watched this thing all the way through, but if you're watching it in pieces, you may not have gotten this. When you're creating your pages, you could actually include that footer in there if you wanted to as well. Here's the other thing. So, by the way, commit this with sitemap. Make sure your code is well formatted, because that's one of the things I look for. Is like when you're looking at your pages, make sure they are, I actually have them up in here for mine right now, right? So make sure, right, when you're looking at your pages, now I like to format them just the standard formatting so that I can look at things and they look well organized, because that's an important part of it. Don't do anything else. No CSS. As a matter of fact, don't even create a CSS folder yet, because this is important. So now what you can do is you can continue refining your pages, use whatever commit messages, but just tell me what you modified, right? And so here's the question, or here's the way I'm going to grade this, is did you meet my requirements, and how well organized is the content of your site? So again, you want to think through this. This is like what I've gone over here is like the kind of the more, here's the things you need to do, da 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 da. But you definitely want to spend some time up in here thinking about how are you going to organize this site, right? I actually spent quite a bit of time thinking about why write prompts, how to get started with prompting, the ethics of prompting, right? And I can even tell based on this content that over time, because I was first thinking more of it as just AI, but now I targeted on prompting, I need to go back and refine mine. I noticed I did address here. I did have a kind of a one consistent subheading for all of these. But remember, you only need one H1 on your page. That's why your outliner, right? That's where your outliner comes into. Okay, so what you're going to do here, remember, a couple things to keep in mind. You're going to give me your commit history for your P1 folder. Okay, so I'll look for that. I'll go in, I'll pull your code, I'll validate, I'll read your readme.html, I'll review your code, see how well you got everything organized. Make sure you hit the requirements, make sure you got the images and the page okay, make sure you got all those required things, make sure everything works. Make sure you did the titles, right? So it is a bit of work here for sure, but it's work for the most part we've done already. So it's just taking it to a new level. And I think the thing I'm adding here is the idea that we have a standard menu that is on here. And if you want to create, and we saw this actually in Dave's stuff, is he had an instead of a primary nav, he had an alternative nav down there as well. So you could have just some kind of page navigation for that if you wanted to. I'm totally fine with that and using the IDs to navigate. But if you're not, and that's the other thing I would say, is if you're not using anchor links, then you don't need the IDs unless you're using them for CSS, so you can add them back as we move through the CSS. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So when I go top of page, right, that's an anchor link to the top of the page. If I'm not using that as an anchor to some linking on the individual pages, then I don't need that ID in there. Okay, it's only when I am using that that I need it. So come see me if you need help. I look forward to seeing your output, and I'll talk to you later.